So welcome to my channel on technology space with machine learning and artificial intelligence. So the today's topic is digital twin as a system of systems. And this is also part of the playlist of digitalization. So let's move on to the main content of this presentation. So let me explain why this is an important concept in the process of digital twin development. In this presentation, we are not planning to have an in-depth discussion on the digital twin development in a more technical level. Rather, we are looking into a more high-level overview of the development of digital twin for complex systems. These complex systems be denoted as this system of systems. So that means these complex systems would be developed under combination of multiple systems. And then if you're collecting data from these multiple systems, you end up with something called this SoS data space, or the data space for system of systems. And you should imagine this concept we are elaborating or adopting from the space science. So if you think about this data, each data point as a stars, the combination of these stars would create one bunch of data clusters. And these data clusters will belong to a specific system. So if you have a bunch of similar systems, then combination of these data clusters would create data superclusters, like the superclusters of stars. And then if you have a combination of multiple superclusters, then you create this SoS data space. That means it's similar to our space or the universe, where we have a multiple superclusters of stars being created to represent the space itself. And you should also remember, when you talk about these data clusters are interrelated for different systems. Those relationships are developed through the various operational conditions. So I would give you an overview of these data, starting from this data point itself and elaborating towards the data space, and then how these data points of the data clusters are for different systems are related to each other in this presentation. So as we have discussed, most of these complex systems can be represented as a system of systems, and we would have to develop digital twin towards such type of a system. So these systems will collect quite a lot of data. So because of that reason, you eventually end up with extreme data sets. So these extreme data sets consist of multiple high dimensional data clusters. I think we have had an additional discussion on what is extreme data in another video. So I would recommend you to go through that video also. I would place a link to that video in the description in this video. So these higher dimensional data sets, data clusters, represent the system of system behavior. In this situation, in this figure, we are considering an ocean-going vessel. So you can see the vessel IoT being utilized to collect these high dimensional data sets. And then these data sets are representing this system of systems. That means vessel itself and the respective ship systems, including the respective inputs and outputs coming in out of these system of systems. And you can imagine this is a highly nonlinear complex system to be considered during this process. So when you're developing these digital twin models, we also have mentioned that you should have some type of a model objective. I am considering the model objective for this situation as the ship energy efficiency. So in the future slides, I'm going to discuss further how these ocean-going vessel as a system of system can be developed, and what may be the key points we are going to consider at this point. So let's consider the data set from a marine engine. So this is one of the systems in this system of systems as an ocean-going vessel. So the data collected in this engine is the engine power versus the propeller speed. And you have to remember this diagram also called the engine propeller combinator diagram, where you can see the engine power versus the propeller behavior is represented in a single flat surface, where you can understand how these two are related. Anyway, in this figure, these white dots represent the data points, and then these darker regions representing the data clusters. Now you can imagine you got a data set from the engine, and if you looked into this data set itself, you would see 3 clusters in this situation. So that means you kind of clustering these data sets, which is you derived from the marine engine itself. You should remember there are reasons for this clustering. At this point, the reason for having 3 clusters is this engine, this marine engine in this vessel is operating around 3 operational points. So that is the reason you have these engine data clusters. So if you try to combine bunch of similar system, for example, in the ocean going vessel, you might have more than one engines. So if you combine these data sets from multiple marine engines, so then you end up with having a combination of various data clusters for several marine engines for this selected vessel. So that way you can create this an engine supercluster. So eventually you combining the data sets from multiple engines, you end up with this engine supercluster. So that is the concept. You can elaborate it towards additional systems in this vessel. So now we can imagine combination of various superclusters would create this SoS data space. So this SoS data space is a representation of the system of systems, and then different systems being different systems and the similar systems being represented by superclusters, and inside these superclusters there are various data clusters that are related to various systems. And you should remember these systems are related to these various operational modes in between data clusters itself as well as the superclusters itself in this data space. So let's try to give you an example of this SoS data space for an ocean going vessel, and this is how that can be developed. So you should also remember this the extreme data that you are collected from this ocean going vessel as well as the domain knowledge we would be integrated in these situations to create this data space. So in this data space there must be extreme data set that should be included into the data analysis process. So these data sets can be categorized as initially the vessel navigation and ship system operational and maintenance data. And then if you have so this data set's been collected from the vessel itself. So if you have additional technologies that you're planning to introduce into the future, more like green ship systems to reduce emissions or improve energy efficiency, then you can collect these data sets. Often these technologies may be in simulated conditions, lab conditions, or model scale conditions. So you can collect those data and then you can insert that data also into this SoS data space. And port related data as well as the domain knowledge going to be a part of the similar data space. So since our model objective is ship energy efficiency, we consider this engine propeller combinator diagram as the basis for this SoS data space. And I think I have given you an overview, small overview of that engine propeller combinator diagram in my previous slide. So you can imagine that is the basis for this SoS data space. And then not just the engine and propeller itself, but if you're introducing additional technologies like batteries and fuel cells or any other additional resources with energy harvesting technologies, that can also be part of this engine propeller combinator diagram. So far I have described what sort of a data set should be introduced into this data space and what should be the basis for this SoS data space. And then let's move on to the additional content in this data space itself. So let's try to investigate this SoS data space with respect to an ocean going vessel. Here you can see most of the vessel itself as well as the ship systems being dismantled into various superclusters, and then these superclusters are connected through various operational modes. And then we started our discussion having these data sets from a marine engine, and then we talk about the clusters in that engine itself, and then we also mentioned if you're combining multiple marine engines you might end up with this marine engine supercluster. So then there are other superclusters that may related to this marine engine supercluster. So those clusters can be fuel, lube oil, and hull. So there are various data sets you can collect from the hull as well as from fuel as well as from lube oil. And then these data clusters or the combination of superclusters will relate to the marine engine supercluster. And then this marine engine supercluster is connected through this engine operational modes into the power configuration modes. So that way the engine can provide the various power requirement into this power configuration modes through applying various operational modes. So these vessels are operating in various power configuration modes. These operational conditions can request power from various sources. So as a marine engine can be one of those sources, or multiple marine engines can be some of these sources which can provide power into this power configuration requirement. And then if you have some energy efficient technologies which could harvest energy from various additional sources like waves, wind, and solar power, then these sources can provide additional power into this power configuration mode. So I think that's an advantage when you're having this type of a digital twin type of modes. You're looking into the incoming power into the system configuration itself. Then eventually you end up with additional systems in this vessel. We are requesting power from these power configuration modes to do their functionalities. Those systems can be identified as these emission reduction technologies, propeller itself, cargo heat and reefers, and accommodation. And there can be various pumps including cargo ballast and main and auxiliary engine pumps, which could be a part of this vessel itself. So the basic idea is there can be multiple systems. They are requesting power from these vessel marine engines and then other energy harvesting technologies that should be connected through these power configuration or the operational configuration modes. So, and you can see the various superclusters which are related to different technologies now are connected in this digital twin through various power configuration or operational modes. And then you can imagine, if you're thinking about the propeller, this propeller itself can have different additional modes which it can operate. So this situation I'm considering various propeller pitch modes, and eventually vessel itself consists of various trim and draft conditions which this vessel should operate. So that can also be a part of this digital twin as a SoS data space. So these vessels will face various wind, wave, and current conditions when these vessels are navigating in an ocean environment. That should also be an additional operational mode that should considered when you are combining various superclusters in this SoS data space. And then ultimate target would be to predict some type of a system behavior from this SoS data space as a digital twin. So since we are considering an ocean going vessel, the whole objective is to predict vessel navigation and ship system operational conditions. So predicting such type of situation, we can eventually identify what may be the optimal ship navigation as well as system operational conditions. So then if you identify such type of optimal operational conditions, that can be utilized towards normal ship operation. So that way you can eventually reduce fuel consumption as well as the emissions. So that way the energy efficiency in these vessels can further be improved. And when you're looking into different combination of these different superclusters as technologies, you can also identify which type of system configuration and operational modes should be utilized to achieve this optimal navigation conditions. So that is that is also another advantage of developing this type of SoS data space through the data collected by various systems in this situation. So that's the end of my presentation. So hopefully you have enjoyed that also. So if you're interested in similar content, please stick around. Thank you.